of You and the Law podcast, the one and only law enforcement podcast that's tackling critical policing and social justice issues and provides insights into the daily realities of policing with your host, Chief Virgil Green.
Hey, welcome to another episode of You and the Law podcast. I am the host of the show, Chief Virgil Green, and tonight we've got a special guest who's going to be joining us on the podcast as we're going to be talking about a case that's out of Philadelphia. And so if you have any questions, any comments, put them in the chat. If you're watching on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. Again, thank you for tuning in and joining us tonight for another informative topic right here on You and the Law podcast. And let me bring my guest onto the podcast. Sonny, how you doing? Hold on just a second. We kind of lost some audio here. Let's kind of I'm gonna take Sonny off the screen and then we'll come back and we'll try to get this audio straight because we just had audio before we came on the podcast. So if you're just stay right with us, don't change anything. We'll be right back until we get the audio squared away. All right. What about now? Sonny, can you hear me now? I can't hear you, but let me see what's going on. How about
now? Can you
hear
me now?
Yeah, now.
The mic is muted. Yeah.
Okay, your mic is muted. Okay. All right. Well, Miss Dr. Sonny Slaughter, thank you for taking your time to come on You and the Law podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Chief, for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And hello to your listening audience. Hopefully they will chime in and put some questions in the chat so we can have a conversation about this critical and very heinous case.
Yes. And, for those who are not familiar with this case, we're going to be talking about it's the Kada Scott, who was kidnapped and murdered in Philadelphia. And so we're going to be talking about this case as well as how did the system fail Kada? And because it is something that has gotten a lot of news in the Philadelphia area. I don't think, Sonny, it's got a lot of media attention, like on CNN or MSNBC.
Well, they can't cover all the cases.
Yeah, they can't cover all the cases.
But it has gotten a lot of media attention. It has gotten a lot of social media attention. And I know people always want to see CNN and those, but actually social media and TikTok has gotten a lot of hundreds of thousands of views there. That's actually where people are looking and more engaged on those.
On those, yeah. So Sonny, won't you tell our listeners about you, your background, and because you're very well known, you are distinguished law enforcement analyst, and so tell our listeners more about Dr. Sonny Slaughter.
Well, thank you so much once again for having me. I'm Dr. Sonny Slaughter, a doctor of humane letters from Miles College, just in May 2025. Thank you so much, Dr. Bobby Knight, for this gracious honor. I am a former federal law enforcement instructor with the Department of Homeland Security. So I traveled across the country focused on their domestic violence initiative. I'm also one of the few non-sworn to have taken several classes authorized by them, including the hate and extremism course for sworn law enforcement, as well as I went to the Drug Task Force Supervisor School. I am also a Florida Department of Law Enforcement instructor, the Executive Seminar Program. I'm a litigation and jury consultant, which means you will see me either, as I tell my students, in the classroom or the courtroom. Either one doesn't make a difference. And I am a legal analyst on television, CNN, News Nation, Fox. I am a weekly analyst for Court TV, covering high-profile crimes and murder trials and cases. And we just covered a civil case today, in addition to Law and Crime Network and international stations. So I've been doing this for over 35 years in some form or fashion. And it's just an honor to show up. And I worked a lot with law enforcement chiefs like yourself. My work is always around the profession. And I got my Wiffle shirt on tonight. I'm a proud member and law enforcement instructor for the Women in Federal Law Enforcement.
Okay, all right. Well, you definitely have like I said, a very distinguished background, and it's definitely my honor to have you on the podcast. And you know, I saw, you know, several weeks ago you had made a post on LinkedIn about the Kada Scott case, and I hadn't heard about it, but looked into it and reached out to you and said, hey, would you mind coming on, being a guest on the podcast? And you said yes. And so, you know, it's always good to connect with people, and LinkedIn, it links people together.
Yes.
And so I've met so many people who are now friends on LinkedIn who come on the podcast. And so, but you know, tonight is a real serious topic to talk about in this Kada Scott. So I've got for those who are not familiar with the Kada Scott case out of Philadelphia, got a news clipping that I want to play. And then on the other side of that, we'll come back with our guest, Dr. Sonny Slaughter, and get in more into the Kada Scott.
Disturbing new details about the tragic death of Kada Scott. The man accused of kidnapping the 23-year-old is now charged with her murder. CBS News Philadelphia's Brandon Goldner live in our newsroom with the latest and this new timeline. Brandon, good morning.
That's right, Janelle. Good morning. We're still working to find out how Kada Scott was killed and when Keon King, the man accused of killing her, will be arraigned on this new charge. Meanwhile, Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel made a promise to Scott's family, friends, and residents during a community meeting about safety.
We will not stop, ladies and gentlemen, till everyone who was responsible for her death is brought to bear.
As that search continues, newly released court records reveal on October 4th, Kada Scott received a dozen calls from Keon King as she was arriving to work. Those records say Scott texted King, quote, "kidnap me again," and King replied, quote, "better be up to," followed by plans to meet later that night. It's important to note we don't know the context of these messages. At the same time, court documents say a co-worker overheard an upset Scott on the phone saying, quote, "I can't believe you're calling me about this expletive." Court records show the last text between Scott and King said, "CM when you hear," or "call me when you're here" at 10:09 p.m. Scott's seen leaving work a short time later. Cell phone data shows Scott and King arriving together at Aubrey Rec Center's parking lot next to the vacant Ada H.H. Lewis Middle School. Soon after, court documents reveal Scott's cell phone stopped transmitting a signal at 10:24 p.m. Sources tell CBS News Philadelphia they believe Scott was killed 20 minutes after she left work. Court documents show King had help. On October 5th, court records reveal a surveillance camera captured King and two other people in a rec center parking lot next to the middle school. Two are seen moving what court papers describe as a heavy object consistent with a human body. Records say they then went to an area where Scott's body was eventually found. Investigators say the car King used to pick up Scott was set on fire on October 7th.
We continue to pursue anyone who helped, who concealed, who participated in this act.
King remains in jail. Again, we're working to find out when he'll be back in court to be arraigned on that murder charge. We reached out to King's attorney, but we have yet to hear back. Janelle.
All right. Thank you for that update, Brandon. And the tragic death of Kada Scott is now drawing attention to public safety and vacant properties in the city, including this vacant school where her body was found nearby. Dozens packed a community town hall last night in Germantown, blocks away from the Ada Lewis Middle School. Top city leaders, including the mayor, the police commissioner, who we heard from in Brandon's piece, and the School District of Philadelphia Superintendent Tony Watlington, were there to address residents' concerns.
I want you to know that we've directed our team to check every one of our vacant properties.
Knock it down, leave it as a park. Trees. Get rid of all this freaking junky cars they keep bringing around here. Get them out of here.
CBS News Philadelphia saw district crews cleaning the vacant Fairhill Elementary School in North Philadelphia yesterday. The school is one of 20 vacant school properties within the district.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sonny, that's just a tragic, case. To see a young lady, I believe she was 23,
Yep.
be a victim of a crime. And there's so many, unanswered questions as to why did this young man, who was only 21 years old, obviously had some kind of relationship with her. So more will definitely come out. But from your legal, lens, what stood out with you about this case?
So I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. So I am a tri-state girl. That means Philly, where my grandfather was and where I have a lot of family, is in my backyard. I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. So Philadelphia and New York and all of that area is home for me. And I saw the case because I get a lot of news from everywhere. So I see cases. We don't have to cover them, but I see it. However, it was actually the article that I wrote that you saw, because what I do is I do case summations on things that we're covering on television and sometimes on other cases. But it was one of my followers and supporters that reached out to me that has a large fan base and her own page. They have their own page, and they said, Sonny, can you look into this and write about it? So I actually get requests from those that follow me, and that's why I wrote the article. And I began looking at it also because we did cover the another case that was heinous of a young woman who went on a date and then was murdered and dismembered. And you probably know that one, Sade Robinson.
Yeah.
So we covered that case, but I get a lot of requests to talk about things that are not necessarily on CNN or MSNBC. And it depends on what it is and if I have the time. But this case is particularly heinous because she was a young woman that was doing what she needed to do.
Yes.
And unfortunately, as you said earlier, where did the system failures come in? And because I teach not only, law enforcement and online, but in academia, I have developed programs. I'm always focused on the things that we miss and how I do something called C3, crime, criminal justice, and community, and the intersection of those, because I have a background in public health. And the public health work around data and knowledge is really critical, because while we're talking about police investigations and the criminal justice system, there needs to be a thoroughfare, a medium, I'll say, and that's where the public health, because violence is a public health issue.
It is.
And this was a murder. And because they have some sort of relationship, I also focus a lot on domestic violence. And we are not categorizing these types of cases in the way that they should be. Now, remember, she got murdered earlier this month, well, October. We're into, but they're still investigating, and you know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my role as a legal analyst on television and communicating with my supporters and followers, I am explaining process. Because a lot of times people want to protest, they want to tear up things, they want to get rowdy, they want to scream, but they don't understand the critical components of our criminal justice system. And none of that other stuff that they do, none of that changes anything.
Exactly.
Because there is a process in place. So I'm always, I lived down in Alabama off and on for 30 years. I understand marches better than most. Because I spent a lot of time with with the legends of the civil rights legacy and leadership, including Harry Belafonte. But I've never marched. I don't march because I'm a policy and paper person.
Okay.
I need to unpack that. And I also need to explain, like I've seen comments, and I'm sure you've seen them. Well, the police, they let her out. And that is because people in their anger don't understand that the police actually had nothing to do with his release.
Exactly.
To do with his arrest, his and tracking him down, and they are still in the midst of an investigation. But it's comments like that that I think make me, as an in-between person, somebody that is a connector and communicator, to say, see, this, let me explain process to you, because that's not what the police are doing. The police are investigating right now.
Yeah.
They had nothing to do with the release. And then, you know, it is up to, they have bail commissioners.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and I think, you know, Sonny, for those who are not familiar with the case like you and I are, there was this young man had a previous charge for strangulation, and I'm not sure if it was strangulation and kidnapping, but
it was kidnapping and strangulation.
And strangulation. And that victim did not come to court, and ultimately the case was dropped. And so, you know, this goes to a larger conversation that we've had on the podcast before, and I'm pretty sure you've talked about it: domestic violence. And you know, is it something that there's a lot of women who are murdered every single day behind a domestic violence relationship?
A lot of men and women.
A lot of men and women.
And I always like to correct, because we always say women, but there are a lot of people in general that are murdered behind domestic violence. Yeah.
So, you know, I think, you know, when people found out that he had been arrested and he had a bond, but that bond was reduced and he got out of jail, I think, you know, just from the things that I've read, that community is pretty upset with the system as to how did this 21-year-old who had means to get out of jail. Not every 21-year-old has funds to get out of jail, especially, I want to say, I think the bond was reduced down to $200,000, which meant
it was
you only had to have 10%, which is $20,000.
Yeah, and it's not his money. He has family.
Family. Yeah, and so, you know, and it seemed like there was some things going on with the DA's office trying to, you know, have a higher bail on him.
They wanted $1 million bond. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, and so and we're going to get into that conversation later on about, you know, bail reform, because as you know, that's something that a lot of people, there's a lot of conversations on both sides about bail reform. And I've got a video that I want to play where the ACLU actually filed a lawsuit in Philadelphia challenging the bail reform. And so, you know, along with this murder case, there's a bigger picture. And so, you know, and as we talk tonight about the murder of Kada Scott, from your legal, you know, lens, is there anything that the system could have done to not only protect her, but protect the first victim that this young man dealt with?
So I am the former coordinator, state coordinator for the Alabama Silent Witness Initiative and the National Silent Witness Initiative, and I did it in Alabama. Domestic violence has been in my wheelhouse from A to Z for decades.
Okay.
And that is what I taught for Homeland Security. One of the problems with there is no consistency in training unless it's done at a federal level, or even though it might be mandated in a state. The problem with this is I'm also a law writer. So I write legal. I am one of the drafters of Alabama state anti-human trafficking state law and the law on strangulation. So a lot of times most people don't know there's a separate, you have domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the enhancement of strangulation, usually starting at somewhere around 5 years or so. That becomes the tack on for that. Strangulation, and I have a post because October was National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I did a post, and I think I'm at 10,000 views or something around strangulation, and that it is a lethality indicator for murder.
Yeah.
And we don't treat it that way in the criminal justice system. So in the Kada Scott case, the victim that Keon King, the alleged murderer, he harmed her, and it was a severe case of strangulation because they wanted $1 million bond.
Yeah.
So when you think about bonds and the severity of the bond, it had to have been severe for them to ask for that amount.
That higher bond. Yeah, you're right.
It doesn't usually, because you won't usually get that. And then it did get knocked down to $200,000, which is still a very high bond on a case like that, in which strangulation that doesn't result in someone's near death and medical assisted doesn't even usually rate for $200,000. So when we talk about his bond and his bail and victim advocacy, everyone should know that in the process of this victim's advocacy, you have at the district attorney's office, you have victims witness coordinators, and they coordinate all of the services around victims, around mental health, safety, and all of the things that they may need. This victim, according to everything that I've researched and read about it, because I don't write unless I done researched and did a deep dive on it. So the victim was afraid, and the victim did not show up for court. Not once, not twice, but I think it was 3 different times the victim did not show up, which is why they had to drop it. Unfortunately, in domestic violence cases, we have to start, not we, the district attorneys and prosecutors need to find a different way to prosecute these cases, even if they have no direct victim, but they have enough good investigative evidence to prosecute these cases, even without a victim. Now, not every state is like that, but most states are. And that is why he was able to get out. He doesn't have that kind of money. He has his family. Has money.
Yeah.
His mother and father, they posted the bond. They dropped the charges. And then in this case, his parents also hired the attorney that he has now prior to knowing what the charges were in the Kada Scott murder.
Yeah.
And he has a very high profile attorney for Philadelphia.
Yeah. And that has caused a lot of controversy. Well, it has caused a lot of talk in the Philadelphia area because the family obviously has money. They've got a high profile lawyer. And that, I think that has kind of rattled some people because they kind of feel like this attorney should remove himself from the case.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to any of that foolishness that his attorney, he's a defense attorney. His job is to defend people. It doesn't mean that he likes them. And I don't subscribe to any of that where people dictate how you run your business. And I mean, Constitution says everyone has a right to legal counsel.
Yes.
And those with funds and money can afford to have better counsel sometimes than others. So, if the investigation was done as well as it should have been, then they will have him.
Yeah. So I want to ask you this, Sonny, going back to the victim in the first case, do you think, and as we talk about domestic violence, I mean, and it appears that the young lady in the first case was young, probably, had never dealt with the criminal justice system before. Should DA's office do more to connect with victims of crimes like this here, for them to understand the process and how this works and what's going to happen, and for them to feel like, yeah, my safety and my safety of my kids is important, but it's also important that you follow through with the charges that you file. And I don't know, just kind of, what's your opinion on that, and how can the system really make the victims feel more comfortable and be there by their side? Because as you mentioned, a lot of DA's office have victim advocates, but maybe they can't get to every case. But just what's your opinion on that?
So the district attorney should not have direct contact, ongoing contact with the victim. It's improper from the legal lens.
Yeah.
It is improper, which is why they have a third party in between them. When they meet with the DA, they have a conversation, they go over testimony, make sure things are clear. But the DA is not holding the hands of the victims. That is improper. It is unethical.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, when I talk about process, a lot of people don't understand. That is actually the criminal justice and the lawyer and legal process. The DA has a limited role in engagement, ongoing engagement, which is why they have assistants and why they have victims advocates. And the victims advocates are well trained. I have worked with them from the United States Attorney's Office, from the state office, from the counties, and the local. These are the individuals who are trained. They know the law. They understand process. They are there to get them services. And then there might be a second chair or somebody else that might begin to talk to the victim about what will happen in court in more detail. Mm-hmm. But we have to separate roles, and people have to understand what the DA's role is. The DA's role is to be an arbiter of the facts, have empathy for the victim, but stay focused on the evidence.
Yeah.
And not get entangled, because remember, they are just like law enforcement, they are navigating case after case after case, and there are people in place to do that. There are resources and services. However, I don't know about this particular resources and services. Just because a service exists doesn't mean that they really meet the measure of what individuals need. Yeah. And fear is a great factor in silence, particularly when someone doesn't know whether they're going to be safe, because the DA's office cannot go and get every single victim from their home and drive them to court. And remember, every victim that's going to testify, every victim that's going to have a conversation with law enforcement, and even with the prosecutors and the DA's office, they have to get there. They have to, they actually have to move there, which is why the other organizations in the communities, domestic violence shelters, other services, which is why they also have advocates, legal services to go with victims as well.
Well, and and I think that's really important as you talk about, the third party arm that's dealing with the victims. Are there other organizations that are providing some kind of resources or services to victims of domestic violence. Because again, when you have that fear, and there's a video of this young man walking up to the back window of a home, and it's been seen on TikTok, and it's pretty scary. And it sounds like there were two young women in the house, there was kids in the house, and so obviously there was some fear that they had with this 21-year-old, and for whatever reason, I mean, you can't force or make somebody go to court. But there again, it raises the question, if there were those services available from a victim advocate or from other people in the community, and to say, you may have never even been down to the court, but how are you going to get there? If you don't have the transportation, who's going to get you there? So,
and that's what those organizations are for. And that's what they do. And the other third party, well, the other legal arm is contacting law enforcement right away, because the victims advocates can't do anything about what is on that video, because I've seen the video of him going up to the window. He's literally in somebody's yard, and the victim's yard, and they're scared and everything. That's where law enforcement comes in. However, with everything that I just said, let me say this. I just had a call today with a woman who was a victim. And I'll say she still is a victim, even though she is not in proximity of the perpetrator. And she has a daughter too with the perpetrator. And the daughter attacked her.
The daughter?
The daughter, the 17-year-old daughter who lives with the actual perpetrator, he attacked her. And the response that she got from law enforcement, the response that she got from victim services, the response that she got from the DAs in this particular state, I got to try to figure out how to navigate her around some things, because while I'm saying these things exist, there is a reality to how they exist and how people show up, and that actually there's no oversight.
Sonny, you and I, as we talked the last couple of days or week, you and I both know he's a good friend of yours. I had him on the podcast. He's out of Carlsbad, Eric, and he trains law enforcement officers around all over New Mexico and around the country on domestic violence training. And it is something that, I know firsthand that we don't do a lot of, and it's not really mandated in a lot of states the way it should be. And you have a lot of officers who really don't know how to interact with a person who's a victim, whether it's a man or it's a woman or somebody who is, in the LGBTQ community. They don't have a connection. And if you don't have that empathy for a person of what they're experiencing, they're going to shut down. And I think that's why it's so important, Sonny, that agencies, the officers responding to the call, they're going to be the first. But normally they don't have that type of training. And I know a lot of agencies cannot afford to have a different specialized domestic violence unit go in and deal with these victims. But that's where it starts at. And it starts with the training.
It really does, which is why I'm glad I'm able to talk about domestic violence a lot on behalf of WIFL and on the platform. My last training that I did on domestic violence was in September, and it was on domestic violence in the profession. And you are absolutely right. But one of the things that I also tell the public is that domestic violence is one of the most lethal crimes for law enforcement to respond to. So I think it's really important as we talk about this today on your platform and on others, that is actually one of the first things that I say, because people want help, but I want to clarify that help is available, but a lot of times help is in harm's way. So when people critique what wasn't done, I always want people to understand, and we just had one not too long ago I was listening to, where the police officer went and he was attacked, him and his partner. So I have to talk about that and train about that. And we also have to, as you said, and really clearly, people, we like to talk about domestic violence as a women's issue, as a woman's issue. Domestic violence is everyone's issue. There are children who are victims of domestic violence, women, there are men, and men don't report. Trust me, I've covered the homicide cases on these, and we have the LGBTQ community, and the case, like I told you today. So we all have to, and we say, if you see something, say something. Well, a lot of times people see something and don't say nothing.
You're right. And I think, and that's something that we've talked about on the podcast before with our, women who've been victims of domestic violence, and I'll say this, Sonny, and one of the things I like to do is just keep it real on our podcast, on You and the Law podcast, is that in our community, it's women are not encouraged to come forward.
Right.
And one of the things that I've had on a guest who's out of the Little Rock, Arkansas area, she's a survivor of domestic violence. And churches do not do a lot. And this isn't pointing any fingers at anybody, but this is, you see in a church where a pastor or the first lady or somebody will say, oh, well, no, you don't want to do that because that's going to get Deacon so-and-so in trouble. That's going to get so-and-so. And so women are discouraged from coming forward. And I think that's something that in our community, we need to really talk about more, because like you said, it's just not women, it's kids who are victims of domestic violence. But we need to have the Black community really step up and play a much more important role in reporting this and being there to help people who are victims of domestic violence.
So since you said that, I am going to say, so I still do a lot of work in the state of Alabama, and I'm the consultant for the Alabama Coalition Against Rape. I just developed a faith toolkit that we're going to be rolling out around crimes. They allowed me, I decided which issues were really critical: domestic violence, sexual, the stuff that people, like you just said, we need to talk about. And I have all the steps in there to train the faith leadership, and I'm going to do some trainers with them. But the toolkit is in depth. We're still working out some things, but I've gone back and forth down there to, and this is it's for any church, but the focus is really on Black churches, but the toolkit that I designed is for any church. It doesn't have a culture or anything, but it's a particular church. And we are covering right now on Court TV today, and for the past day or so, we are covering a domestic violence murder where the pastor was murdered. This is a Tennessee case.
Yeah.
And the wife got shot and the girlfriend, and he came up with some foolishness. So from the pulpit, we can't have folks not talking about the real issues, and people want to run out and do things for everyone else, and they haven't even checked on the flock in the house. Yeah,
exactly. And again, you got a pastor who get up on a Sunday and say, hey, you're not putting your tithes in, but you got a church member over here who's dealing with domestic violence, and somebody knows about it and they're being quiet about it. In the case that you're talking about out of Tennessee, I want to say the suspect, or the lady who committed the murder, she's from Little Rock.
Yes, she is.
And so and again, it's not a secret, Sonny, that there's a lot go on in Black churches that you do not, people don't want to talk about it.
They don't.
But it's a soap opera. And so again, I definitely commend you for the work that you're doing in putting together this toolkit for the churches, because that is a piece that is missing. And again, we don't talk about it
Right.
because we're worried about all the other issues and not being there for the victims. And so,
Absolutely. You are so right.
yeah.
But I used to sit on the dais in 3 different courts in domestic violence court in Alabama. So I sat next to the judge and I read the files and looked at everything. And if I told the judge, I said, first of all, well, I'm gonna have to talk to the police officer because they didn't write a good
report. And that's and that's another thing, Sonny.
Just like, oh.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It starts with the officers responding to the call. It starts with the report.
Yes.
And it starts with then if a supervisor who reads that report, before that report is submitted to the DA's office, that report should be reviewed. And I'm not going to exaggerate, probably maybe 5 or 6 times. It really needs to be reviewed over and over again.
Over and over. And because I do lens, language, and law, content matters. And I'm an expert witness. So I do officer-involved shootings, and I always, like I said, I tell law enforcement, I'll see you in the courtroom or the classroom. Either one don't make me a difference. Yeah. If you write in your report about domestic violence that the defendant choked the victim, I am going to hit it up. And there was a chief that had me in his office. He said, Sonny, go through there. And I would sit there quietly, very wealthy county, where domestic violence is covered up, largely white, well, 99.99% white. And let me tell you, I said, see, training, because people are not choking other people. The law is strangulation. They have to. They can say the person said choke, parentheses, but they must use the language strangulation. The person was strangled. They need to make sure they go to the hospital. They need to have all of these services, because you cannot, if a person says that they were strangled, you cannot just walk away after you've taken your notes. They need medical attention. Law enforcement needs to really press that, but they also got to know that.
Yeah, you're right, Sonny. And that's one of the things that, I was with an agency in Arkansas, and, I'm not an expert when it comes to grammar and all of that, but I have a pretty good sense of what I read. And reading through some of the detectives' reports before they were going to the prosecutor's office, I took out my little red pen and yellow highlight and just went through it. And one particular, it was a domestic violence. And they put choke in there so many times. Oh, and I looked it up and I said, hey, in Arkansas, you have a statute related to strangulation. Why don't you use the word strangulation? And they were like, well, it doesn't matter. And I said, it does matter. And I said, and they were like, well, we've never done that before. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you, change it and put in strangulation.
Yes.
Because when the prosecutor or DAs look at that, that strangulation is going to stand out more than the word choke, because you can sit there and say, oh, he put his hand around my throat, or he put his hand around my throat, or whichever. But when you say strangulation, it carries a much bigger, the tone is different.
Well, choking, let me put on my EMT hat, former EMT. I'm paramedic.
Man, you done it all. You done done it all.
Yes. I was actually the youngest certified EMT in New Jersey way back in the day. That's my little plaque up there. But
you say, wait a second, son. You say way back in the day. You're a young looking lady now.
57 years old. I'm 57. I started out at 16.
Oh, okay.
I'm an EMT in New Jersey. That is the Public Safety Award from the state of New Jersey. I'm the youngest person, one of the first 8 to ever receive it, and the youngest person to receive that for saving 2 small children going to EMT school.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. But I say that because when I'm teaching, all of the things that I've done always matter, because I can tie it back to something. First of all, choking is a medical term. Not a legal term. When you're going to court and criminal justice, the fact that you had to explain that to the officer definitely means they need training, because the law, lens, language, and law. That's my L3. That's what I teach. The law is what matters. And you want to use strangulation because you want to trigger the DA into charging that. Law enforcement is a part of the process, and everything that they do in an investigation matters, on the legal side, not just on the enforcement side, because it ties in to the way in which a prosecutor, district attorney, or the Commonwealth present their cases. And you want to use the terms, and you want to show knowledge, you want to show training, because if I'm looking at a law enforcement officer's jacket and I'm looking at all of it, I'm looking at every single thing that they've done. I'm looking at what they have written. I'm looking what others have written. I'm looking at the language. And no, well, I don't like math. I can always add my money, but I'm not a math person. But just like you said, you know, I don't have to use big words. I know the big words, but you have to understand how, and in policing and in your work, and you know, because you lead departments and agencies, law enforcement leadership, just like many of those that are watching right now, it is really important to lead by example.
It is.
And to ensure that the jury, because remember, everything that we're talking about, including the Kada Scott case and every conversation, everything we are talking about is about process, but it leads to something very important, and that is presentation to a jury. So when we have law enforcement professionals that do the job that they need to do and do it well in every instance, then we tie it into what the prosecution must do. We can't leave any gaps and holes, because the presentation before a jury is what has to happen. We have to have things in ways that they understand, that a lot of times when I'm talking to, and on television and court TV and all of the other shows, it is so people can understand. This is for the jury. I call it the JOPO, the jury of public opinion. And the jury of public opinion are those that vote, because we don't tie in the juries to our voting. When we talk about voting, like this election that we had, elections matter, not just because we want to put a particular person in office for the mayor and all of that, but when we think down ballots, I'm a political hat because I do that too differently. But the down ballot that we don't ever think about, that is directly tied to policing and to criminal justice systems, has to do with the jury. Because the jury of the public, the JOPO, jury of public opinion, and the sworn jury are of a community that has voted, that has been selected, and that they watch more television, and they think CSI and 48, not 48, 48, the first
48.
Yeah. So they think not the first 48, but SUV, that things are crimes are solved in that block of time, when that's not how things operate. And that is why it is incumbent upon all of us, whether you're sworn, non-sworn, whether you're the 911 operator, because see, we often forget about our communications folks. We do. Train with law enforcement too, because when somebody called and said Kada Scott was missing, they didn't call anybody. They called 911. And I tell all the public, when they think that law enforcement showing up is where the investigation begins, actually, that's when you make the 911 call. And then that recording, we sometimes hear it in court, and sometimes we don't. But it becomes a critical piece of the investigation for law enforcement, for the prosecutors, and for the juries, because they sometimes get to hear that too. So everybody matters. And Kada Scott, the bail reform, I know we said we're going to talk about, but all of those pieces of the puzzle, process matters, because it gets us to the murder that we are talking about now.
Exactly. But hey, Sonny, I want to remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast that tonight we're talking about the murder of Kada Scott out of Philadelphia, and I've got on a very distinguished guest, Sonny Slaughter, who if you watch Court TV, you definitely have seen her on Court TV, CNN, Crime Door TV, Law and Crime Network. So she's all over the place. And tonight she's right here on You and the Law podcast. And I can't, definitely honored to have you on to talk about this here case. But I want to get into bail reform, and I've got a news clip that I want to play for you and the audience because this is out of the Philadelphia area where the ACLU filed a lawsuit against the Philadelphia court system related to bail reform. So we'll show this video. On the other side of it, we'll talk about bail reform and how this bail reform may have impacted the first case.
New at 6, mega lawsuit. Today, the ACLU sued Philadelphia courts over its system of cash bail. As KYW News Radio reporter Cherry Gregg explains, the plaintiffs in this case claim that magistrates in the city fail to follow proper bail procedure.
Money bail only works for the wealthiest individuals who can buy their way out of jail.
The ACLU of Pennsylvania filed this lawsuit today on behalf of more than a half dozen individuals who are in prison pre-trial simply because they can't pay bail.
It's not about how bad the accusations are. It's about whether you're going to come back to court.
According to the suit, ACL volunteers sat in on 2,000 arraignments over the past year and discovered bail magistrates meet with the accused less than 2 minutes, rarely allowing them to speak, and set bail without regard to affordability or the individual's threat to society.
They're setting bail basically just based on the charge, sometimes based on someone's criminal history, but that is not what they're supposed to do.
The lawsuit is one of a number of attacks on cash bail. Last year, Philly DA Larry Krasner eliminated cash bail on more than 24 low-level offenses as advocates raised money to bail folks out.
And my mom, she was struggling. She had 7 kids.
Joshua Glenn was charged as an adult at 16 and spent 18 months in jail because he couldn't pay $2,000 in bail. His case was ultimately dismissed. He now runs the Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project, one of the plaintiffs in the case.
When it comes to the city and it comes to these politics, nobody does anything until you take action.
The ACLU says that the main goal of this lawsuit is to get the bail magistrates to do their jobs.
Bail is supposed to be set based off a person's ability to pay, period.
While the courts have declined to comment on the suit, the plaintiffs say they want the state's highest court to force the judges to consider bail alternatives and make sure no one is behind bars simply because they are poor. Cherry Gregg, KYW News Radio for CBS 3 Eyewitness News.
Well, I know, Sonny, you got a lot to probably add to that.
It's interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. It is. And not just, this isn't a problem just in Philadelphia. It's a problem across the country.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to bail reform. And especially, unfortunately, after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, it seemed like it picked up a little bit more attention. But it is something that, like I said, so many states and cities are dealing with is the cash bail system.
So, because I've lived here probably 10 years. So I was previously the co-chair of the Violence as a Public Health Issue Committee for the 8 states in the Southeast: Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida and Georgia. For region, what we call Region 4 under Health and Human Services. And the work, the Violence as a Public Health Issue Committee under Public Health was a new group because I said I do a lot of things and none of the stuff that y'all currently have focuses on this. So mass incarceration, human trafficking, and violence and health issue and gun violence, these were all caveats under here, under our thing. And we had lawyers on there, public health. We just had a really diverse group of folks. cash bail came up under our mass incarceration. And I also was the external compliance officer for a reentry program for more than a decade. So I have worked all angles of this. My concern about some cash bails is that the ability to pay and not based on the charges. I absolutely agree. The magistrates, which don't always look at everything, and then you have bail commissioners, which sometimes are instead of the magistrates. Do they have a full understanding of process when it comes to not just law, but when it comes to the type of crime? And if we're complaining about Keon King, we don't know whether he had $20,000, but he had access to $20,000. And when you have access, $20,000 might not be a lot for his parents. But what about if we have bail reform and we allow people to get out based on their ability to pay? Then the bond could have actually been lower if he didn't have his parents and he had a couple of dollars. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. It does.
So we have to weigh. I believe that we need to take that the magistrates and those that are looking at the cases, this never should be rushed. They should really take time to ensure that we have all of the evidence and information based on the person's background, history, things they've done before, to determine what a bond should be, if they can make the bail. And then also the parameters, because you can have a cash bail, you can have a bond, you can have a bail bondsman, you can have only cash, you can have property. So there's different components on how you can get the money to meet it. But there was a young girl, Courtney, who was an influencer on television, and she murdered. She is white. She had the black boyfriend, and she had millions of followers. And then she killed him. She's been in jail for 3 years with no trial.
With no trial.
So there are a lot of people. So a lot of times when we think about reform, we only think race, but there are a lot of factors when it comes to reform, because most often women don't have the money if they commit a crime to get out. Children and other things.
Yeah. Well, and in this case with Kada Scott, the first victim, that's kind of where it all started. And when they asked for this high bond, and I think you said it was was it $1 million or something?
Yeah, something like $1 million.
Yeah, and then the bail commissioner reduced it down to 200, and then at some point there's I thought I read somewhere where the DA's office could have appealed it, but they didn't, and he ended up being able to post the bond and getting out. Again, as you just mentioned, looking at what is the rush, everybody, people shouldn't just sit in jail for a long period of time because everybody has rights.
Right.
But at the same time, looking at the totality of the charges, and because if the DA's office is asking for this high bond, that should trigger something and say, well, what is this case really about, or what is the charge really about, and has the person had any priors? But even if a person, and I'm gonna ask you this question, Sonny, if a person hasn't had a prior charge like this here, and I'm gonna say this, it's probably not the person's first time, but the first time in them being actually, somebody reporting the crime. Because if you're going to strangle somebody or you're going to kidnap somebody, this isn't your first time doing it.
No. I think the severity of the crime should dictate the amount of the money, and also where law enforcement is in the investigation. Now, I will say this. Sometimes, and in far too many cases, we have to watch the DA's office too. The DAs, Commonwealth, and prosecutors, because they can get a little excited and overcharge.
Yeah.
They can get excited, overcharge, they can extend. But in the case of strangulation, it is a different story.
It is.
In this particular case, it is a different story. No bond and or very high bond with a lot of restrictions on there. And I think people are too quick to let some people go. Now, mind you, this is a black man that killed a black woman, and Philadelphia is a black community.
Black community, and it's in a inner city, and Sonny, and oftentimes it's not something that we can really overlook. Is the system really there to make sure that they are there to protect everybody? And just because you are a 20-something-year-old young black female, may not have finished school, or you may have kids or whatever, none of that should matter because you're a victim of a crime.
Exactly.
And this happened in Philadelphia with a similar case. If it happened in, I'm gonna say, Oklahoma, would have probably been handled differently. But because of being in the inner city, you're gonna have things are not looked at the same. And it's unfortunately, and I could be wrong, Sonny, but it just seems like in inner city like Baltimore, Philly, area, communities that have a high population of people who look like you and I, you don't really see the same type of services that they should receive.
Well, the lady that called me today didn't look like us. And the state that she had the incident in was Colorado. And she had a lot to say. But you also have to think about small communities with law enforcement agencies and like Alabama, Mississippi, those rural communities where they actually need money, cash bail, making sure people pay that bail, pay that bond, because they would rather get the money than actually hold the person in place.
Yeah.
Because then that puts more strain on the services and resources. But then they also don't have all of the services and resources that need to fuse in for victims either, which is why I sit on the Violence Against Women Act for the state. And so we look at all of the counties. There's 67 counties in the state of Alabama. And we look at all of the counties and the services and what does domestic violence look like? What does sexual assault look like? So you have to, there's so many factors. When we think there's just one thing, bail reform would be uniquely different in a small town in South Alabama or North Alabama that's really rural, where they need the funds and they set those bonds and those bails and they don't look like us.
Yeah.
So bail reform, I think you can't blanket it. It's not a blanket where it looks the same in every place. So it really does require some nuance, some understanding, some training. But you can take an entire state and then map it out and say in these rural counties, we need to ensure that magistrates are looking at the totality of the crime, have a clear understanding of what the law says, and that the investigation is far enough along where they're still investigating or they have enough evidence to meet the measure of whatever the charge is that the prosecution has come up with.
Yeah. Well, and Sonny, and this, I think, when you talk about bail reform, let's say, police officer pulls somebody over, arrest them for a small amount of marijuana. Now they go to jail. The DA's office says, hey, I want a $500,000 bond. Now you're talking, okay, here's a $500,000 bond for somebody who's been arrested for, marijuana. But then here's somebody over here who's been arrested on domestic violence, and they get a $50,000 bond.
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, well, how does that make any sense? That a person commits a very serious crime, their bond is they're able to get out of jail versus a person who got caught with a couple of, joints and
Yeah.
but they got a high bond. So that's where you have that conversation about bail reform because
Right.
there's no consistency.
And you have to think. So the argument on the side of law enforcement and the prosecution is that they are bringing drugs into the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
You got drugs coming into the community versus somebody who is a victim of domestic violence.
but domestic violence isn't always treated as something as serious as it should be in community. Which is why most of the time, look at all the number of, anytime a victim doesn't come forward, there's always a reason why. Look at the number of victims who have been murdered at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Have been murdered on their way to the courthouse.
To court. Yeah.
Have been murdered as they were trying to get a divorce. Yeah. After the law enforcement have been to the house on more than one occasion.
One occasion. Exactly.
So there's plenty of data that says death and lethality are really intertwined. And when we think about the Kada Scott case specifically, the text messages that are available to the public, because I always tell people, law enforcement know more than they telling you and telling everybody, and that's what is supposed to happen. You don't need to know everything. Yeah. But what we know that's available to the public is there's some language that says, kidnap me again. And we don't know what that context was. And then somebody else hearing her talk saying something about, she got upset. But they didn't know who she was talking to unless she told them to.
Yeah.
She told them. So these I think we need to start even before we get to the murder, even before we get to what happened in the first place. What is it about, and I'll just talk about women right now, this context. What is it about women and young girls that find themselves snared in the trap of men and boys, where they find some of the things that are happening as romantic and alluring, which puts them in proximity to danger? How is it that what is happening in our lives that we can't recognize danger and criminality?
Yeah. Well, and Sonny, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree, that's a whole nother podcast to talk about. That, how do these young women, and as you just mentioned, young women get caught up into these type of relationships and they don't know how to get out of these relationships? Are they running from something? Did they leave home? What is their relationship with their parents? There's probably so many different factors there, and then they find themselves in a relationship where they can't get out because it may be money, it may be kids, and oftentimes you don't see a lot of young girls who are working. There may be, unfortunately, living with state assistance. And so, but there are just so many different layers there. And again, I think this is where, we've always heard the term, it takes a village to raise, to be involved with somebody. Where's the families at? And I guess, again, it appears that Kada Scott came from a family that she was,
she was at home.
At home, yeah.
She lived at home. She worked. She went to college. So it's not just those that look vulnerable. There was some, and she was beautiful.
Yeah. How did she get mixed up with this guy? And
I saw him, and I'm just like, what did she say to him?
What is their relationship, and what was his relationship with the other young women? Because that video that has been shown on TikTok with him walking up, looking in the window, was a sign that this young man had some serious issues going on, and he was a violent person. Just by looking at that video, you saw some he was not stable. And
he doesn't even look stable when he was just in his mugshot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks scared.
But and Sonny, I know we're a little bit over time, but now you've got these accomplices who are definitely, he had somebody else that helped him move the body.
Mm-hmm.
How, what is in the minds of these other people who find themselves disposing of a body?
Yes.
And now, and their lives are, their lives are ruined.
Yeah. I'm using the term, I wrote something and created something called Behind the Veil, and it's around domestic violence and people who identify themselves as victims, and really they're the perpetrators of domestic violence and murder. And then you have proxy by murder. So the proxy by murder are the individuals who become the co-conspirators, either to the actual murder or to the cover-up. And you have to ask yourself, why would somebody even want to be involved? Were they coerced? Were they forced? Were they threatened? I mean, is this a part? There are a lot of proxy by murders. There are a lot of accomplices to these types of murders. And it's just really strange. We are evolving into times and people where humanity is so lessened, and people don't care about humanity or others, or they have no empathy, they have no lens or anything.
Yeah. Well, and earlier today, Sonny, I saw, and I know you've talked about this case probably, but the young mother, I want to say in Kentucky, who killed her 2 sons. I think that case is getting ready to come up, and it's just what goes through a mother's mind. And here's somebody, just by all looking at the photos, the videos, that's seemed to be a very good relationship with her kids. But what drove her to murdering her 2 kids is something that, obviously will come out in the court case. But, but as we, that's just a whole nother case as to what is really going on with our society. And what is,
does that person get bail? Is that somebody you want to give bond to?
Bond, yeah. And I think she's been held without bond.
Yeah, she's being held. Yeah. She's being held. But there are I have been covering a lot of cases around mothers who murder a lot over these several years on the True Crime Network. And I am on a case tomorrow. I do a lot of these other conversations on law and crime. So I got another one today for tomorrow that I'll be unpacking with Elizabeth. There's a lot. People are really heinous these days. Men who, the last one I just did with Elizabeth Milner on law and crime involved a man who murdered the girlfriend and the baby. Well, she was pregnant and she wouldn't have an abortion, and he had another girlfriend, so he murdered her. Done a lot of those. Memphis had the other one. Well, we covered on Court TV, where the baby in the river, where the black guy, he killed the mother, and then he threw the baby in the water. But what would make a young girl with a 2-day-old baby, she's still wide open, and she going out to meet him, and all of these people meeting and going, just like the lady who called me. The daughter attacked her because they went down some road and they were walking in the park and it was dark. And I kept thinking, well, why the heck did you go with her?
Yeah, exactly.
So, people, I'm not meeting anybody down some dark road, what are people thinking?
Yeah.
They need to stay at home.
Yeah.
But even though you can get murdered at home, but I'm not meeting you nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we're, you just mentioned about, this husband killing his wife and daughter. I just saw a movie, and it was from a true story where this man was having an affair. He murdered his wife and 2 kids, but he made it look like the wife had murdered the kids. and then he ended up killing his wife because, he would, but come to find out, and then he buried the kids in an oil tank. And it's just like, again, this is all over you having an affair with another woman, but you got to kill your wife and your two daughters. Sonny, just makes you again wonder, where are we at in society? Because that's not going to be there'll be another person who will commit the same type of crime.
Well, on Court TV every Monday, we are covering one case after another case, which is why, and because sometimes I do more than one day, which is why I'm always focused. We can't, no news station can cover everything.
No,
because there's literally so much happening. Yeah. So I get to cover the cases that the producers select, but they're so heinous and there's so many. There's never a dull moment. And then Court TV, long crimes. I get to cover those, but there's so many. There's so many missing girls. There's so many missing children. There's so many heinous murders that are domestic, and that's what I'm usually covering, of domestic violence, murder, or something for long. There's just so many of them, and every single day, and you know this, Chief, and all of those who are watching, every single day in America, someone goes missing, and it's a lot of someones.
It is. And Sonny, and that's just something that, and I don't know if I shared this with you when we first met and we were talking, when it comes to Black women, Indigenous women, and just women of color, it's not covered a lot, and women go missing, and, then next thing you know, you heard a little bit about it and just kind of goes away. And that's just something that, like you just said, you cannot cover every single thing, but that's a whole nother conversation around.
Well, the Black and Missing Foundation, there's a documentary that's coming out. I don't even know. Do you know about the Black and Missing Foundation?
Yes, I heard about it. Yeah.
Okay. So they cover the cases. I've been doing stuff, and I used to work cases myself as an individual. Families would call me, or law enforcement would say, "Sonny, can you work with families?" Because like I said, I'm focused on process, and I always work with the family and tell them what process looks like, and stop posting things and different things like that. So I have worked a lot of missing person cases myself, along with family members. But let me say, there is a complaint, and I tend to agree. But what are Black people doing about covering it? There are black podcasters. There are Black executives. There are media folks. People can cover anything they want to now on social media. It does not have to be on national news. And a case, like you said, I didn't know about the case in Philadelphia. If you're covering the cases where you live at, and if you're talking about, there's a lot of cases and crime that happened in Cincinnati, and women gone missing and trafficked, and they're trafficked and they're murdered. The Gilgo Beach case, there are a lot of people that where cases are significant. And the other thing about Black women and girls and children, if you, and I did read, I talked about this when it happened in California, the Ebony Alert. So if people want to work on the Ebony Alert, that's legislation. It was started out in California. They can model their legislation behind that, and that notifies. There's one for the Feather Alert for Indigenous women. But if we're so focused on what other people are not doing, then I always ask, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So people can cover it.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, Sonny. I think, just with what I'm doing and so many other people are doing on podcasting, it is a platform that you can, I don't want to say expose, but you can definitely talk about these cases.
Absolutely.
And people be more informed, because like I said, everybody is doing a podcast, but it has to be the right content. It has to be something that somebody is going to be educated and informed about. And I think, and that's one thing that me and my my former host who helped me, we started the podcast, Chief Humphrey out of, he's now with the University of Memphis. It was about the content. It was about, it's always been about highlighting some of these cases that people don't know about or talk about. And I think that's why, people continue to follow the podcast because of the things that we do talk about, or what I'm talking about now, because it's not talked about in any other type of platform. So,
and what they need to do, we have Black police chiefs, we have Black sheriffs, we have Black fire chiefs, we have Black pediatric medical professionals, we got Black everything. So, what are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? And again, and this is something, you know about Noble. I'm a member of Noble.
Yep, me too.
And you're a member of Noble. And even on that level with Noble, what are we doing on a national level to really raise the awareness of domestic violence? What are we doing raising the awareness of human trafficking? All these type of things that are going on.
They have been doing a lot on human trafficking. When Tony was the president here at the DC chapter, and Dwayne came down, and I was one of the instructors and trainers that we did at NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We did a training there for law enforcement. And I know Noble recently put out the information around human trafficking. They put out a document that was developed really well. I didn't personally work on it, but I saw it. And it was a really well put together document. I have not seen anything on domestic violence, but then once again, we can't cover everything. But they are doing something. But if we want to talk about people of color, then we have to do. First of all, we need to stop killing people that look like us, and people, we have to stop killing each other. And we have to stop trafficking each other and being violent. But people have to do what they can do. Like I don't live in Alabama. I do a lot of work in Alabama, though, around violence. I actually don't do work where I live at around those things unless somebody calls me. I mean, I do meet with senators and elected officials. I have conversations with them directly on gun violence when they call me to the office and things like that. But crime is always in proximity. So people in communities, if there's a podcaster in a community that is talking about the issues, talking about ways to get support, and having knowledgeable guests on, and police chiefs like yourself, getting involved, having them on to talk about process so people in the community could understand what that looks like. I think crime in relation to proximity and the information that is closest to them is really critical.
Yeah, it is. Well, Sonny, it has definitely been a pleasure having you on the podcast. And you're an extremely busy person. And I want to, again, say thank you. Hopefully I can get you to come back on some other time to talk about some other cases, because again, you bring a lot of knowledge and information to things that we talk about on You and the Law podcast. So hopefully somewhere in the near future we can get you to come back on and maybe even do a follow up on this Kada Scott case, because again I think it's real important. And to see where this case goes. And so many other cases. So,
well, Chief Green, I want to thank you for having me. It was an honor when you asked. I was excited. I hope your listeners found it informative and our conversation insightful. And I would just tell people to get involved, to find out. I study cases across the nation and internationally, but other people don't have to go. This is all I do. I'm either developing the training or I am looking at cases, which is why when I see something, I have been doing this way my entire 30 plus some years, growing up, just really the research portion and then putting pieces together, because there's always another case. It's not usually the first one, but we have to stay informed. And I say people should get involved where they can.
You're right. You're right. And that's what I was going to say. I think, get involved in your communities. Churches get involved. We got to have every body in the community, whether you're a community leader or an advocate or just whoever, get involved. And because the more you are informed, just kind of like if you want to know about a candidate before you vote for somebody, you need to do the same thing with what's going on in your communities. And because the only way to prevent some of these things from happening is for more people to get involved.
Yeah.
And for law enforcement for us to do our part, and then the other side, the court system, do their part. So everything needs to work together if we're going to start seeing a decrease in these type of violent crimes.
Yeah. And I want to say one last thing really quick. We always talk about women as being the victims in domestic violence. There's a reason why I always insert men.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was the victim of he was the victim of a murder for hire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The wife, it was a high-profile case in Georgia. And his wife had him murdered. It involved 2 states, Alabama and Georgia. And we cannot just focus on one gender.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was an amazing young man who was gunned down with a plot by his wife for money, and she was having an affair. And so he never got to be a father. He never got to live out his life. He never aged, and his crime was heinous. William Eric Clark is his name, and when I say high profile, there's a lot of information on his case. It also has he has a series on Snapped. He is one of the episodes in Snapped. So that's how big it was. And then lastly, one of my girlfriends several years ago, she was a military woman. She was an amazing woman. And her husband he shot her in the head while picking up their young son at the daycare outside. She survived. And we talked about this when we did some prison reform stuff and work. And she was just beautiful. She survived that. I went to the courthouse with her. I had a relationship with the DA, and we had to go down somewhere. And this man was pretty well connected, but we went in there ready because the DA made sure we were fully armed. We had a whole flock of law enforcement going with us to ensure that she could testify.
Yeah.
But see, that was unique. That had to do with relationships, and we were okay.
Yeah.
But Anita Washington was her name. Anita is not with us because she didn't die from that, but she did die when her oldest son murdered her.
Oh, wow. Her oldest son murdered her.
After
surviving that.
So that's why I'm always talking. I'm not ever saying stuff just to say it. I'm speaking from a place of knowledge and also a place of pain, because when I got the phone call that said Anita was missing, somebody from the military base called me, a friend of ours, and she said, Sonny, they said Anita's missing. And I said, no, Anita ain't missing. Because see, she would never go missing. I said, where's Joseph, her son?
Yeah.
And they said, well, Joseph is with her dad. And I said, I didn't hesitate to think something was immediately wrong, which is why somebody called me. And I was on the phone with Montgomery PD, and I called the chief. I said, let me tell you something. You don't know who I am? Let me tell you who I am. And she did not go missing. She didn't leave. She didn't pack up. She is in danger. And her body was found in a field 3 days later.
Wow.
in the hot sun by a man that was walking his dog.
Wow.
Domestic violence has some very unique parameters, and we don't always classify it
Mm-hmm.
with the data in the way that it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But she had a relationship with her son. It was her son. I never
Yeah.
trusted him. I told Nita, and I knew that was her son.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was jealous and angry, but he murdered his own mother. So
Wow.
now her ex-husband and her son are in the same prison.
In the same prison.
Yeah, they're in the
Oh,
same.
wow. Wow. Well, I mean, Sonny, that is a tragic story all the way around. And again, and you've been doing this for so long, there's probably just countless cases and people that uh, and like I said, you don't know uh, the motive. You don't know how far people will go, and and just like the case that you're talking about out of Tennessee, where the lady from Little Rock having an affair with a pastor, she ended up shooting and killing the pastor, and people, and you hear people say, well, see there, that's why you need to stop stepping out doing all these things. Well, you shouldn't be out murdering somebody. I mean, again, I mean, to a lot of men and a lot of women have lost their lives behind having an affair.
Yeah, it's not even worth it. It's not that.
It's not that. It's not that serious. You pick up and leave.
Yeah.
But to take another person's life because you told me you wasn't married, or you told me, you didn't have a husband, or you told me you didn't have a wife, and again, there's choices that people make, Sonny.
They do. So we got to thank you for your podcast. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you to all of those who are listening for anything and everything that you do. I'm glad you started this podcast. I hope you will have me back sooner rather than later, and we can have discussions around important topics like this, and hopefully we'll be making a difference in the lives of those who listen.
Well, Sonny, for those who want to be able to follow you, to follow the work you do, the information you put out, let everybody know how they can connect with you on your social media platforms.
Oh, everything is either Dr. Sonny Slaughter or Sonny Slaughter, and it's the only one, me. I am the Sonny Slaughter. That's what I used to say. And I have, I am across all platforms. I post regularly. I'm on Court TV every Monday, sometimes more than once during the week. I'm on Law and Crime Network. So if you follow me on X, I have an X page. I have an Instagram page. I have 2 Facebooks of. Well, it was supposed to be a personal page, but I got everybody following me on that, and I only talk about work on there, and I talk about my puppy Cova. So you'll get a little personal on there. I have a business page, Sonny Slaughter Consulting, on there. I have a TikTok page. So I am, and of course I have a LinkedIn page and other things. But if you Google Sonny Slaughter, I have a TEDx talk that talked about being married to a predator. So all you have to do is say, and if you start following me and if you want to connect, please let me know that you heard me here. And I keep it real. I am very transparent. I keep it real on television. I am authentically me. If I feel like I'm going to cry, I have cried on national television. I have no shame because things hurt me.
Yeah, well, you're definitely well respected. I've seen you on Court TV, probably more on Court TV than any other outlet, and I've seen some on CNN. But again, you're definitely well respected, and this is why you're asked to be, on these shows, given your legal, expertise and analysts on these cases. So. Again, I know we definitely went over our time, and for those who are on YouTube watching, thank you, and those who are on Facebook, thank you, and for those who are on LinkedIn, again, thank you for tuning in for tonight's topic as we talked about the murder of Kada Scott. And so, Sonny, you won't be a stranger. I'm definitely going to have to get you back on sooner than later to talk more about not just this case, but some other cases. But again, thank you, and have a good Thanksgiving is coming up. Have a good holiday season.
Oh yeah, don't forget to send my plate. I'm going to have a good holiday season because you said you were cooking.
Yeah. So
your wife to send if she can put together my good care package and everything. I'd like to have 2 plates because Kova need a plate.
Kova need a plate. Okay. Well, I've seen pictures of Kova, so yeah.
And you know she's a big girl, so she needs her own plate.
Her own plate. Yeah.
And we eat macaroni and cheese, just so you'll know.
Okay. Well, I would definitely have some macaroni and cheese.
Thank you so much.
Again, everybody, thank you for tuning in to tonight's podcast, and make sure you tune in next Thursday for another informative topic right here. And if you miss any parts of this podcast, you can follow us on YouTube. Definitely go to our YouTube, subscribe to that. And you'll find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you will definitely find You and the Law. So Dr. Sonny Slaughter, again, thank you. And thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And we will see you next week right here on You and the Law podcast.
Take care, everyone.
That's a wrap on this episode of You and the Law podcast. We've got more eye-opening conversations and hard-hitting insights coming your way, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and stay ready because the next episode might just change the way you see law enforcement forever.